All right, let's take a journey. We're going to look forward into a possible future for the animal kingdom. Over the next century, you've got climate change, mass extinction, and some really radical technology all colliding at once. And trust me, the world that comes out the other side is, well, it's a whole lot stranger than you can probably imagine.
Darwinism on steroids. I mean, that phrase really hits you, doesn't it? It perfectly sets the stage for what we're about to explore. We are not talking about the slow, gradual evolution you learned about in school. No, this is a century of chaotic, breakneck, and profoundly human-driven change. It's a world where survival of the fittest gets cranked up to a terrifying, almost unimaginable speed. So our story starts with what's called the Great Unraveling. This is the part where the natural systems we all depend on just start to break down, one after another. And as each one fails, you see humanity scrambling, trying to patch up these massive holes with increasingly desperate technological fixes. And just look at the sheer pace of this. In just about 8 years, you get these incredible, dizzying extremes. 1 minute, in 2026, AI finally cracks the language of sperm whales, a truly monumental breakthrough. But then, boom, by 2033, the polar bear is completely gone from the wild. At the same time, in our own cities, birds' wings are literally shrinking so they can dodge cars better, while the silent fungus just wipes out most amphibians. It's this cascade of crisis and, frankly, bizarre adaptation, like in 2034, when a brand new worm evolves for the sole purpose of eating our plastic garbage. This right here captures the core theme of the era. For every piece of the natural world that fails, we rush to build a synthetic replacement. The bees disappear, which is a total catastrophe for our food supply. So, what's the solution? Millions of tiny, robotic drone bees to do the job for them. You see? We're not fixing the root cause. We're just building a technological bypass around the problem. And this leads to this unbelievable paradox. In 2033, we lose the polar bear, an absolute icon of our own climate failure. Then, just 2 years later, we birth a mammophant, a hybrid clone of a species that's been extinct for thousands of years. So we become, at the very same time, the authors of extinction and the architects of resurrection. It really makes you wonder, are we correcting a mistake, or are we just showing off what our technology can do? Which brings us to Act 2. Humanity plays God. At this point, we are no longer just reacting to crises. Now we are actively designing life itself. We've gone from being frantic repairmen to being the master planners of an entirely new biosphere. So how does this de-extinction thing actually work in this future? Well, it becomes a pretty standard 4-step process. First, you recover ancient DNA. Second, you edit the genome. You patch the broken bits of code using genes from a modern relative, like using an elephant's DNA for a mammoth. Third, you grow the embryo in an artificial womb. But that last step, that's the real kicker, releasing a creature from the ancient past into a future world it was never, ever meant to see. And that brings up a really crucial point. By 2037, we actually bring back the dodo, a massive scientific win, right? But its habitat, its food, its predators, the entire world it was evolved for is gone. It just becomes a living museum piece. And this forces us to ask the core ethical question of the time. Just because we can bring a species back from the dead, does that mean we should? By the year 2050, things get so extreme that humanity makes this monumental decision, the Half-Earth Treaty. We basically wall ourselves off. We pack ourselves into these super dense megacities and farming zones, and we give the other half of the planet back to nature. But it's not some gentle, peaceful restoration. Oh no, it is an uncontrolled, chaotic rewilding experiment on a planetary scale. And this number is just staggering. By 2070, even with half the planet given back, 95% of all mammal life, by weight, is us, our livestock, and our pets. The wild, that vast, untamed concept that defined our world for millennia, it's been reduced to a rounding error, a tiny AI-managed fraction of what it once was. So, what does this all lead to? Welcome to Act 3, the new animal kingdom. By the year 2100, the dust has kind of settled, and a new, frankly bizarre equilibrium has taken hold. And in this new world, the very definition of what an animal is has been completely rewritten. Okay, so in 2100, life is officially sorted into 3 new categories. First, you have the museoless. Think of them as the museum pieces. These are the classics, lions, elephants, kept alive in what are basically super high-tech zoos. Second, the utilitaries, the utility organisms. These are the things we built, like pollinator drones or plastic-eating bacteria, designed purely for job. And third, you have the mutants feral, the feral mutants. These are the real survivors, the unpredictable critters thriving in our ruins and wastelands. So to really get a feel for this new hierarchy, let's take a quick tour around the world in the year 2100. Let's see what these musealis, utilitarians, and mutants pharaohs actually look like on the ground. We'll start in Europe, which has basically become a continent-sized, perfectly curated park. It's the ultimate achievement of controlled, managed nature. Here, you'll see herds of resurrected aurochs, those ancient wild cattle of Europe. You'll spot genetically beefed-up bison, but the wildness, it's all an illusion. Even the wolves have neural collars that physically stop them from attacking people or livestock. It's nature, but with all the danger and unpredictability completely edited out. Okay, now let's jump across the Atlantic to North America. This is a much rougher, more chaotic place. It's a kingdom ruled by powerful new hybrid predators that are perfectly adapted to a world of megafires and crazy weather. The top dogs here are things like coy wolves and the absolutely massive Growlar bears, a tough hybrid of grizzly and polar bears. And down in the flooded ruins of Florida, giant mutated pythons have become the new apex predators of a swampy, broken ecosystem. This is nature finding a way, all right? Red in tooth and claw. Now in South America, the Amazon has been shattered. It's just a few islands of green and a sea of desert. And here, the evolutionary pressure has forced a totally different strategy, a retreat into stealth and invisibility. Get this, parrots have actually evolved to lose their famous bright colors, trading them in for dull camouflage. And amphibians with no rivers or ponds left have developed this startling new trick. They incubate their eggs right under their own skin. It's a world defined by quiet, desperate survival. Africa has become the last refuge for the world's giant animals. But don't picture a vast open wilderness. It's a fortress. The last of the giants now live behind walls. The last elephants and rhinos are here, yeah, but they're confined to these heavily militarized, AI-patrolled green zones. And outside those fortress walls, the harsh lands are ruled by hyper-aggressive baboon packs and incredibly smart hyenas that have literally learned how to outsmart our technology to survive. Our final stop is the Asia-Pacific, and here, the line between living thing and machine has completely dissolved. This is the ultimate expression of a human-engineered world. The great coral reefs are long gone, replaced by massive 3D printed structures. The oceans are basically farms for genetically modified, super fast-growing fish to feed the megacities. And the skies, they're filled with the constant hum of pollinator drones because almost all of the natural insects have vanished. It's a world that's both teeming with life and profoundly, deeply artificial. And all of this brings us to our final question. After a century of extinction and resurrection, of hybridization and synthetic creation, we're left with a planet that is, without a doubt, alive. But it's a life of our own making. So, in a world that we have so completely and utterly rebuilt, what does the word wild even mean anymore?